I wanted to show you guys this thing here. Now this, well, it's a whiteboard, and this is a to-do list. And are you noticing how many of them are crossed out? Almost all of them. Now, for those of you who don't have ADHD and you're watching this for some reason, I know that may seem like a very small thing, but if you have ADHD or something similar to it, you know how, or at least I'll assume that most of you will know how big of a deal it is, or how much of a struggle it is for us type, us guys, us gals, to, and if there's background sound, I apologize, there's a lawnmower that it's so difficult for us to write down a list of seemingly simple things to do and to actually do it. I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, but I think it was a doctor or a professor or psychiatrist, someone like that, a health professional. And they were talking about one of the defining features of adult ADHD anyway, is that you know what to do, you just don't do it. And I've almost said that when I'm discussing with my close friends, you know, how things are going. I often say that about myself, like I know what to do, I just don't do it. Which is where, when people say you're smart, I just think like, well, I don't know how smart someone is when they know what to do, but they don't do it. I guess it's better than not knowing what to do. But I wanted to just bring up this idea of to-do lists because I know that for many of you, including myself, the struggle is very real when it comes to making forward momentum in your life on a consistent basis. Typical day for me, with my brain being the way it is, and I'll remind you again, I haven't had a formal diagnosis yet of ADHD, but it seems increasingly likely whatever I have is at least manifesting in a very similar way. But one of the big struggles is writing down a to-do list and then actually following through on it. And then not just a to-do list, but the continual writing down of the to-do list and then not following through on it. Not only do you not move your life forwards, but you begin to judge yourself. You're very self-critical. And you go, look at this to-do list. It looks great. Get to the end of the day or the end of the week, and you haven't crossed off any of it. And then, if you're anything like me, you run into the syndrome where you have ended up writing the same bloody things on your to-do lists for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, I don't know how long. And so what do? You say, well, to-do lists just don't work. And you stop writing your to-dos, not because they're not important, but because you just go, well, what's the point? I've been writing the same bloody thing on my whiteboard or on my piece of paper or my journal for years and it never got done. And then worse comes to like the even worse part. And I've talked about self-help and how sometimes it's really bad for people with ADHD because they always say like, what's the one defining characteristic of successful people? Oh, they're driven, they're motivated, they're organized and they have this list, they set goals and they visualize. And you're like, I could get me some of that. Like I could do with some of that because again, if you're anything like me, you could do it. It's not like you're writing a to-do list and you have no idea how to do the things that are on your list. They could be too big or too overwhelming, or you could write simply too much on your list, and you might be a horrible judge of how long something actually takes. Another ADHD thing, time management or the lack thereof. But it's not like you're writing it up and going, I have no idea how to go grocery shopping. I have no idea how to brush my teeth. I have no idea how to go to the optometrist. So it's not just a simple thing of, okay, to-do lists, it's hard for people with ADHD to utilize them effectively. There's a whole flow-on effect where you start judging yourself, you start feeling bad about yourself, and the more you're feeling bad about yourself, I think the more insidious a problem becomes. I also think then you really do begin seeking that dopamine hit even more because you're not feeling great. And when you're not feeling great, the thing that will boil you up, that will get you going again, is that dopamine hit. So it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Now, I started this video by showing you that to-do list because I just wanted to share my thoughts. And as simple as that is, you could see the number of things that were crossed off, almost all of them. And they're not complicated things, but for someone with the ADHD, like even getting yourself to go to the shops. Like I went to Kmart here in Sydney to buy glass bottles to do my kombucha fermentation. The second fermentation has to be done in glass bottles with a little rubber stop. And those bottles, by far the cheapest, was going to be in Kmart. So it's like a 20-minute drive. It was a weekend. It was going to be fairly busy. It's not a difficult thing to do. But so often I've had something like that to do and I've procrastinated, right? I put it off to the last minute. Or sometimes I just put it off so long that it's no longer possible to do the thing. Or I rationalize it in my head, oh, I didn't really want to do it anyway, which is a lie. But it's better than facing the fact that, you procrastinated until you just forgot about it. But my point is, I crossed off so many things on that list, and I think it's really important if you're even going to begin to address the whole time management, productivity, and being on task issue. That is such a big deal for people like us. Having that list there and then seeing that you've crossed them off, even if it's just one thing, that is the beginning of progress. And that is something that you need to take stock of, because as someone with ADHD, you are probably even more self-critical than the average bear. You need to really see where you're starting to make progress, because you can only build on progress. You can't build on failure. And if you don't take control of your focus, if you're anything like me, again, you will end up focusing all, all your attention on how you could have done something better, or the things you didn't do, rather than the things you did do. So I just, in the morning, yesterday, it's Monday here, so this was Sunday. Again, I just wrote down some simple tasks. So Sunday, I like to make sure, for example, cut my nails, shave the beard, shave the head, basic grooming, right? Once a week. I also needed to go to the shopping to get those glass bottles. I needed to get a funnel also to pour the kombucha into those glass bottles. I needed to move some bricks in the garden. So all these basic tasks, right? But I just wrote them down, and I've been there many times before. That's why I have a whiteboard, because I like writing on a whiteboard. Something about it just feels good. And I've written down many to-do lists, but and see, I hesitate. So I don't know exactly why I've had more success in the past like 24, 48 hours. Because today, again, I'm using a to-do list, and I'm making a lot more progress on it than I normally would now. Part of it is perhaps to do with the fact I'm on a keto diet. I've had much better quality sleep. Last night was a different story, mosquito, but I've had much better quality sleep. And regardless of whether you've had ADHD or not, or you have ADHD or not, sleep is probably the most underrated thing. But as I said in a previous video, my friend who has ADHD and is a med student has looked a lot into this, was considering or is going on a keto diet because of the effects that it has on epilepsy. Beneficial effects, by the way. And then she looked at how the brain activity in someone who has epilepsy has some similarities to the brain activity in people with ADHD. So I had started doing keto before that because I let myself go physically over the pandemic, and I used to be a tennis coach, and I stopped doing that. And during the pandemic, everyone let themselves go. But when you're used to moving a certain amount every day, you just burn off calories without thinking about it. And then when you stop doing that, you eat what you were normally eating, and you go, shit, like, where's all this weight coming from? And it wasn't so much about looking a certain way, it was about that, if I'm honest, but I wanted to feel like I was getting my energy back. Another thing I've said before was that I would have energy slumps in the afternoon, and I'm actually just had lunch this afternoon. One of the reasons I wanted to do the walk now was to get my energy back up. But I was getting to this point where I'd have to nap in the afternoon. It was just terrible. Like, Maybe if you're 80 years old, maybe you have to have a nap in the afternoon. But at my age, I shouldn't have to be doing that. And so it was not so much about just the way I look, although it was about that. It was about health. It was about energy, just feeling like I was making progress towards something. Remember what I said about you can only build on progress? Sometimes you just make progress in a little area, and it can make you believe in yourself that little bit more, which then has a flow on effect to other areas of your life, sometimes to all areas of your life. But if I bring it back to, okay, all of us can write down a to do list. How did I start actually crossing things off? I think some of it has to be due to this diet that I'm on. It just enables me to look at the thing that's on that board and go, yeah, I'm not super enthusiastic about that, but because if I was, I would have done it anyway. That's a dopamine with the ADHD, right? The issue is there are things in life you got to do that you don't want to do. Look at it and go, yeah, okay, I wrote that down. I know why that's important. And again, this is something with ADHD. You can logically understand why it's important, and then you still struggle to do it. But I think a couple of things happened. One was that I decided to begin focusing more on the activity itself rather than the result. So, for example, now I'm an author. Sometimes the result you end up writing is, I want to write a book. It's too big, right? And so you look at it, and if you're going to cross it off or not, if you've written a chapter but you haven't finished writing a book, I hope this makes sense, you can't cross it off. So it was just too big. So rather than, putting a really big thing there that was about the end result, I would start focusing on the activity. I mean, example, yesterday I told you about the kombucha. I didn't write on the to-do list, make kombucha. I simply wrote, get glass bottles, get a funnel. So I think two things there. One, it's activity rather than result, because you've got to understand, if you do the activity enough, you'll end up getting the result, as long as your activity is intelligently focused, right? Separate story. But the other thing was, I noticed that I've written down very small chunks. And this is something I saw in a Peter Attia clip on TikTok. And he was interviewing James Clear, or being interviewed by James Clear, I'm not sure which. Now, here's the author that wrote the book Atomic Habits. I would say I've read it. I listened to it, audiobook, again, an ADHD thing. And I didn't mind the book. I thought it was a bit too simplistic in some ways, basically saying habits are good for you, form them, so go and form them. It's like, oh, if it was that simple, I would have done it already. But one of the things he was saying, this is Clear, not Attia, was talking about, he was saying the most important thing for him, if he had to pick one thing, was the 2-minute rule. Now, by that, he meant that in order to start forming positive habits, you wanted to do something for just 2 minutes, with the understanding that that would build to bigger and better things later on. But in the beginning, forming habits is hard, and rather than trying to eat the whole enchilada in one go, to chop it up into smaller bites. So they were going back and forth with some stories, and for example, he was saying, don't make the goal to go work out, you just make the goal to go to the gym. Or don't make the goal to do your yoga session, just make the goal to go and get your yoga mat out. And he was saying, yes, I know this is silly, but, and of course you can understand where the rest of that story goes. There was even probably more. I think there was a story of someone whose goal was to go to the gym, but he was only allowed to go for like 5 or 10 minutes. That was it. He wasn't allowed to stay anymore. So it was fun ways and unusual ways of breaking down these sort of to-dos that we have in our head, making them really small and manageable, so it's much more likely that you're going to follow through. And then using those as stepping stones to build that to-do list crushing sort of mindset, or at least to the point where we can do a to-do list to some extent, to some degree. Use goal setting to forward our lives, to progress our lives in some sort of consistent manner. That's better than none at all. Because again, like, ADHD people, it's not, at least my brain, it's not like I can't do something. I can do something better than many neurotypical people that I know. That's the whole point of ADHD. But the problem is one day it goes north, the next day it's going south, third day it's going east, fourth day it's going west. And your brain has been running at 1,000,000 miles an hour because you got ADHD. But you end up looking at the end of the week, your net progress is zero because you run 1,000,000 miles an hour in all directions. If someone was just running 5 miles an hour, but every day, every step they were going in the same direction, they would make more progress than you. They would make more progress than me. And the way our society is structured, they would be rewarded more by society than we would, especially in financial terms. And that really kind of hurts, doesn't it? Because you know that you can outthink, outsmart, outwork someone. But the one thing that they do have is the ability to stay on task, which is something that you and I famously struggle with. And that's the whole reason of having that to do. Now, I will say, so I wrote very basic to dos, and I've been more focused on progress and activity rather than result. So, for example, today I have been doing some video editing, and this is one thing that was on my to-do list yesterday. I wanted to learn how to use CapCut, the video editing suite, and DaVinci Resolve, because it's a free alternative to Premiere Pro. I'm sick of paying Adobe money because I just wasn't getting my money's worth. So today I was using both DaVinci and CapCut. I was trying to use them to edit my videos so I could get the practice in. And of course, because I said I wanted to edit 5 videos, and the time I'd allotted, I was only able to edit 2. Why? Because it takes time. Even when you learn a software, obviously it takes time to become as familiar with it as what you used to use previously. So I've been using Premiere Pro. I think my subscription said I'd been signed up since 2015. So I've been using that for 8 years. And so you begin to it's second nature. You have to think about, C to cut, V for the pointer, all this other stuff. And so I said, I want to do 5 videos, but I only, in inverted commas, did 2. But here's the thing. If you focus more on the progress than the result, maybe you look at that to-do list and go, okay, I can't cross off 5. But could you put in brackets, do 2, and then cross that off? And again, I know that might seem to you like it's silly, like it's childish, maybe even that it doesn't count or that it's cheating. And I'm not going to argue with you. I mean, in some ways you are right about all of those. But if you were teaching a young child a skill and they'd never been able to do it before, and you said you wanted them to do something 5 times, and they only got 2, right? Only got 2, but previously they'd done none, would you, A, berate that child for only getting 2 and not being perfect, or B, would you encourage the heck out of them that they even got 2, so that the next day they come at the same task not feeling shit about themselves because you beat the self-esteem out of them, but going, okay, I got encouragement for doing 2 yesterday. Today I will try for 3. And who knows, I might try for 3 and get 1, get none. Progress is not linear, but my point is, if you need to start noticing where you're making progress, because ADHD goes hand in hand with self-criticism, goes hand in hand with perfectionism. It's like a deadly triad, because it either means everything's perfect or you're doing nothing, and life is never perfect. So you often feel like you're doing nothing, even though you're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, going in every direction. So there's no net progress. So I was doing that yesterday, and even the practice of, acknowledging that I'd done something, not perfectly, but got something done. What do they say? Done is better than perfect, right? And again, I've heard that before. I'm sure you've heard that before, that done is better than perfect. But it's sometimes hard for us to apply that to our everyday lives. So that's yesterday. I was doing that. And then, as I said, I only managed to get 2 done rather than 5. But if you can write it down on the board, you write down small things. You write down thing and 2 minutes if you want, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is you think you can focus for. And then you focus more on the activity rather than the end result. And then, as I was saying, even if it's not perfect, even if it doesn't quite work out the way what you thought it was going to work out, let's say you thought something was going to take 5 minutes and ended up taking an hour. Of course, you can learn from that, but rather than viewing that as a failure, give yourself credit for the fact that you at least started doing something. And then, of course, I don't need to tell you because your brain will do this. You bookmark that next time in your head. Next time, maybe you need to estimate more time for tasks, right? Again, a huge ADHD thing. We look at something and say, someone asks us, how long will that take? Yeah, 5 minutes. And then you start doing it, and 5 hours later, you still haven't done it. And then you go, oh, this is, and then again, the self-castigation sets in, which, as I've said, you might think it's well-deserved, but it doesn't help. That's the thing. This is why I've really gone sort of not so hot on self-help. I'm bigger on realism, right? I don't want to hide the truth from you. Like, yes, okay, so it's not taking you 5 minutes, it's taking you 5 hours, and yes, that's not ideal. But hey, at least you've begun doing it. And hey, also, next time, you can learn to estimate more. Maybe you double the time that you estimated, or quadruple, or 10x it, whatever it is. And so, yesterday, as I said, I had an incredibly simplistic list. But the funny thing was, as I begun crossing these things off, guess what started happening? It started feeling good. Now, I don't just mean feeling good as a throwaway line. For you and I, what that means is the dopamine starts surging. And how important is that? If this whole to-do list goal setting thing that we struggle with, if suddenly that becomes a dopaminergically positive activity, if that's the right way of describing it, it just starts feeling good, writing stuff up, crossing it off. Because I know ADHD people who actually are very goal oriented. Sometimes their problem is they can't take the foot off the gas. But if you can train yourself, everything is in balance. If you can start training yourself, your brain, to attach dopamine to setting some goals, achieving them, and then, sure, monitoring them on some sort of regular basis, measuring them to make sure you're on the right track. How far could you be a week from now, a month from now, 3 months from now, a year from now, just because you've taken that crazy brain of yours, this one that runs 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you point it in one direction? Or because we have ADHD, point it in 3 directions. But you get my drift, right? You take all that energy, all that mental focus and acuity, and rather than, like if you take a high pressure hose, or you just take a hose and you turn it into the jet nozzle, if I point it at the garden and I just keep swinging it everywhere, it might disturb the soil, but it's not going to do much. On the other hand, if you take the same hose, same pressure, same nozzle, you direct it at one point on your soil, one point on your garden, what's going to happen? And you watch it. It's like a laser. It starts bubbling, bubbling, then it cuts through that outer crust, and then suddenly all hell breaks loose and bits of soil start going everywhere. I know this because, when you're washing the car with a high pressure hose, sometimes you like to see just how powerful the high pressure is. But you get my drift. It's like that concerted effort drills that will drill through steel, through rock, through anything, because your intensity with that laser, that's your brain, that's your mind, is so much hotter. It burns so much more intensely than a neurotypical person, a typical neurotypical person would. And this is the other thing that I was thinking about, and I think it bears reminding you, because I know you know this, but I also know that, giving yourself some credit is a good thing as long as you don't do that. So let me just remind you of this. ADHD, sure, it has some drawbacks. No two cases are exactly the same. Some of the drawbacks are bigger than others. Some people require medication, some people don't. I don't have any judgment on that, by the way. I'll say that again and again. Whatever works for you, do it. Do more of it. But what I will say is ADHD also comes with some huge bonuses. Many people would say that creativity, natural intelligence, ability to learn, ability to self-learn, as in you don't need a classroom. You will find when you want something, when the dopamine hits, you will learn about that topic. You'll become an expert on that topic faster than anyone. And at some probably tomorrow I'll talk about tennis, because that was the case for me with my tennis. I had to teach myself that by myself. I had to self-teach that. But ADHD does have some huge benefits. So for me, the whole reason with this journey, like trying to get my thoughts into some sort of coherent video to send to you, we don't want to lose the benefits. I don't particularly want to become normal. I've always viewed normal as being somewhat boring, and I don't really like saying that because I don't want that stigma to be around that neurotypical people are all boring, nor do I think that every neurodivergent person is necessarily more interesting. But we have certain strengths, and for me the game is capitalize on our strengths whilst mitigating our weaknesses. So capitalizing on that creativity, that intelligence, that ability to learn faster than anyone else. And, sometimes doing things in one day that other people would take a week or a month to do. Ask me about that. I have stories about that. And mitigate against typical weaknesses such as time management. It's a big one that we've been talking about today, our ability to stay on task. And, you mitigate against it for yourself as best you can. If you're in a company or if you're in a workforce, it'll be good to balance you out with someone who is more neurotypical so that your weaknesses balance out and your strengths complement one another. But this is the thing, I want you to think, what are some of the gifts that accompany my ADHD? Because if you're like the majority of people that I've spoken to who have ADHD or are in some other way neurodivergent, they all have gifts, and they're not hard to see because you'll know. Because when you speak to them, you feel like you found your people, and you can see how brilliant they are, and you want to encourage them. So think about it. Make sure it's not just for them, for you. Make sure you take some time to take some sort of inventory as to what your strengths are, the things that you're really proud of. Maybe it's creativity, maybe it's intelligence, maybe you're really good at conversation. One of the things I love doing is interviewing people. And I've gotten really, really good at that because I really do love hearing about people's stories. Now, I realize that came down to a deeper desire to help people. And I realized that if I wanted to help people, first thing I needed to understand where they were coming from. So I needed to listen to them, get their story. But that's my point. It's not like ADHD is not, for example, my sister died from diabetes when she was only in her 20s, very unexpectedly. It was very sad. And my family has a history of diabetes. Grandmother, grandfather, mother, sister. Diabetes doesn't have an upside, right? I mean, you could say, yes, now that I've learned that I have diabetes, I don't, but theoretically, I learned that I have diabetes now, it's made me go and look at my diet more closely, so now I'm eating more healthily. Sure, but you could have done that without the diabetes if you really wanted to. The syndrome itself, the disease itself, it doesn't have any upside. Doesn't make you stronger, doesn't make you more creative, doesn't make you anything. But ADHD does have some benefits, again, for the majority of people. So take inventory of your strengths, your unique strengths. Yours may be different to mine, but at least take inventory of them. Write them down. Because again, the self-criticism means you probably focus every day on that to-do list that you've written down for the 5 billionth time, never crossing out any of them, and getting frustrated with it and starting to believe that goals don't work, or they work for everyone else, but they don't work for you. And then, rather than addressing it by using some of the simple, very simple steps that I've tried, do your own equivalent, whatever you think might work. But we take a goal-setting course. or we go to a personal development seminar. And I've been there, done that, not throwing rocks or pointing any fingers, but at the end of the day, being an ADHD person, you probably know exactly what it is you should be doing. You're just not doing it. So rather than getting more information or hoping that a neurotypical person will give you a solution that works for an ADHD person, because in my experience, it doesn't work that way, start breaking down however it is you want to do, whatever you want to do, to be able to use to-do lists, goal setting, forming habits. Break it down and be kind to yourself, because we're not very good in this area. So break it down, as I said. Write them down first off. That's really, but write them down, because very often it can feel overwhelming in our heads because we keep so much in our heads already. Just write it down. Just writing it down, even if you did nothing else, will help you relax a little bit. Break them down into really bite-sized chunks, 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. And then really focus on progress and activity rather than the end result and improvement. Remember I said that. And as you start doing that and you start making progress, because you can see yourself crossing off some of these things, you don't need to tell anyone else, but you will start feeling happy and proud of yourself because you're seeing progress. The dopamine will kick in and you'll be more likely to be able to do it again tomorrow. And because you're an ADHD person, you'll be more than likely to do it better tomorrow than you even did it today. And if you're anything like me and you stay focused on this one thing for 7 days or a week, you'll probably be better at it than most other people would be if they'd focused on the thing for a year. So I hope that helps. I wouldn't be, sending this video to a neurotypical person because they don't have that same difficulty. They use to-do lists all the time. It's like, yeah, I've got a to-do list, and yes, I cross it off at the end of every day, I write up a new to-do list, and then I cross them off the next day, and what's so difficult about it? Fair enough question from their point of view. But when I do something that's ADHD, or as my friend said, that's so ADHD, like writing a book, I wrote 2 800-page books in 2 weeks or a week. When I do that, I go, well, what's so difficult about that? And, you watch neurotypical people's eyes just glaze over, they can't fathom it. But we're taking your gifts that you have, we're mitigating against the weaknesses, and then watch your life on a day-by-day basis start going the direction you want, and then you will, I believe, become unstoppable. Because as I said, the ADHD brain has so many benefits, but you need to get going. It's like priming the pump to get the water out of the pump. Sometimes you need to give it a little something to get started. And the whole point of what I'm sharing today is I hope it's that little bit of encouragement to help you get started, whatever it is. Write it up on the board, break it down into chunks, focus on progress and improvement, not perfection. As you begin to do that, I think the dopamine will begin to kick in and you'll begin finding it easier. So I don't want to say I hope this helps. I know it will help some people. What I'd really love to hear from you is if any of this actually helps you. Like if you apply it and you find it works, or if you apply it and you find it didn't work, and you tried something else that did work, tell me what those other things are, because I'd love to know. And if it didn't work and you have questions, ask me. I'm by no means an expert. I'm just trying to figure this out, right? But if we pull a whole bunch of us together with crazy brains like ours, then we will be able to figure this out. And I really think it's something that we need to figure it out for ourselves, because I don't think a neurotypical person can figure it out, because I don't know what it's like to be us, to be in our brains. So let me know in the comments, and let me know how you get on, because I would like to see you achieving everything that you want to set out for yourself. And if you're anything like me, it's time to start crossing things off that to-do list.